Ted, we've been getting an influx of international buyers coming into Rhode Island, going into Florida, Massachusetts, Connecticut. So, I feel like for our sellers, okay, and for any buyers too that might be listening who are coming in internationally, and for realtors out there, how exactly are we dealing with this? How do you deal with international buyers? And a couple of the things, and I'll let you get into it, but a couple of the questions that arise are, like money. Are they allowed to use their money over there, or does it have to come into our accounts over here, be verified, seasoned? How does that all work, Ted?
It's really kind of the same. I mean, we have transactions that happen regularly that are people from other countries that are purchasing here in the U.S. On the purchase side, it's really not a whole lot different. It's something that generally. Their transfer of their funds are converted to U.S. dollars. So we don't convert it ourselves. We have we receive it in dollars, and that's usually not a big issue. It's the execution of the documents that becomes potentially a little bit of a difficulty, and it more so for a sale than it is a purchase, I would say, and that's probably if we can kind of mention that as well. That would be something that I think is important to point out, because when you buy, it's not really a big deal. You can buy at any time, anywhere, and there are some restrictions. There are actually some restrictions, recent restrictions in Florida, for example, where they're making the buyer sign an affidavit that says that they need to identify the country that they've of origin that they're from, and I think if they're on any watch lists or anything like that, like an affirmative type thing. I mean, of course, we do Patriot Act searches anyway. That's part of the process, regardless. Purchasing, as long as you're not from one of these terrorist countries, then it's not really an issue. We get the funds, and it's not a big deal. But the execution of documents, it just depends on accessibility on their end. If it's a cash deal, lots of times you don't really need to go through the process of getting documents executed at the embassy. Although that would be the preferred way to do it, just because most states recognize that as being a proper notarization of the document. Overseas, you generally try to use the American consulate, or the embassy. And it is difficult to get to it at times, which is a factor that needs to be, people need to be made aware of, because sometimes they have to make appointments. Sometimes it's a distance to travel because there aren't that many of them in overseas. So, and then there's some allowance to a certain degree to use the local notary. On the sales side, you have to be concerned about if they're a foreign national that doesn't have a U.S. Social Security number. You have to go get one. If you're buying something, you bought something here and now you're selling, you don't really need a tax ID number to purchase, but you do to sell. Most people do have their credentials and everything's okay, but you got to also get ahead of that when you're having a listing where it's a foreign national selling their U.S.-based property. You got to say, hey, get a CPA, make sure that you have the tax ID numbers that you need in order to be able to sell, because you need to complete some forms on the sale. And that's federal law. It's not it's not state to state. It doesn't vary state to state. It's federal.
If they don't get any kind of those deductions, then they're paying capital gains taxes, and they're paying, depending on how long they've held, they're probably just paying the capital gains. So 15% federal and then 6% state. I would have in Rhode Island, I would imagine. So 21% in total gains. And in Rhode Island, it would be treated as called a withholding tax, right?
Right. Yeah, and they'd have a withholding, exactly. So there'd be because they're not Rhode Island residents. Yeah, that's right. So there's that additional wrinkle that applies really to any domestic seller as well. That isn't a Rhode Island resident.